Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, during this session, we are going to continue further in our series on principles of management. Dear friends, through our previous sessions, we are discussing a lot on communication. We try to understand about what communication is, the meaning, concept and the process of communication, as well as we discussed on various types of communication. Friends, today in this session we are going to discuss on what are the barriers to communication, and for the discussion we have with us in our studios Dr. Vipin Kumar Agrawal. Dr. Vipin Kumar Agrawal is principal in Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. Dr. Agrawal is a dynamic professor, and through him we always get in-depth knowledge on various topics and issues. Friends, if you have any questions pertaining to today's lecture, then do call us through our toll-free number. Our toll-free number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. You are requested to call in the last 10 minutes of the lecture, as well as you are kindly requested to ask questions pertaining to the topic, that is barriers to communication. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Vipin Kumar Agrawal, once again. Hello, sir. Welcome to the lecture.
Thank you, Dika. So, friends, good morning. Today we will discuss about barriers to communication. In the previous lecture, we talked about what communication is all about and what is the process of communication, what are the different types of communication. As we discussed in the previous lecture, communication is a very important element of human relationship. Without effective communication, it is difficult to have effective management. So, for pursuing any of the function of the management, that is the planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, for all these functions, the effective communication is required, and it is an important element of the effectiveness of the management. But in this process of communication, there are various reasons, there are various factors because of which there is a hurdle, there is an obstacle in the communication that two parties are not able to understand the message which they want to understand with each other. Means there is a lack of understanding because of the various factors. As we discussed in the previous lecture, the basic idea of communication is to create an understanding between the two parties. So in today's lecture, we will discuss what are the reasons because of which, what are the factors because of which there is a obstacles in the communication. Let's discuss this. So communication is a key factor in the success of any organization. When it comes to effective communication, there are certain barriers that every organization faces. People often feel that communication is as easy as simple as it sounds. No doubt, but what makes it complex, difficult and frustrating are the barriers that come in its way. Means apparently it looks that communication is a very simple thing. What I and you are doing, this is also communication. But through this lecture, I am trying to create an understanding in your mind about how the communication, what is the role of communication in the management, and what are the problems that we faces, so that our understanding is not the way I want to create an understanding. So there are obstacles. We have all been there. A conversation or even an online chat or a string of mobile text, which you do it quite often, leads to a terrible misunderstanding, and all of a sudden all hopes of reaching an agreement go right out of windows. Means what are the reason of it, what happens, why, what I want to convey is not being conveyed to you in the right manner. So there are many reasons of it. So let's discuss the reasons of it. So one is the very important reason is physical barrier to communication. There are certain physical barriers because of which there is an obstacle in the communication, there is a disturbance in the understanding. Physical barrier is the environmental and natural condition that act as a barrier in communication in sending messages from sender to the receiver. When messages are sent by the sender, physical barriers like doors, walls, distances, etc. do not let the communication become effective. Means if I am sitting in this room and I want to communicate in the other room, and if there is a wall, there is a door in between this, right, obviously you will not able to, my message which I want to deliver will not be delivered in the same perspective in which I want to deliver it. Means because you will not able to hear it in the right manner. So because of this physical barrier in the form of door and the windows and the wall, you will not able to listen to me properly, and it will create a physical barrier in the communication. So, I mean, apart from this, these physical barrier can be in the form of because of the reasons of environment or climate. Suppose when I am communicating with you, there is a thunder, and the sentence which I am speaking, immediately a thunder noise comes to you, and because of this thunder, you will not able to listen to me properly. It will be a barrier in the communication. You are not able to understand what I am conveying. So, this thunder, rain, wind and other environmental factors create noise which cannot be stopped and disturb the message flow. Natural noise is present in the environment which disturb the communication. So, time and distance, if a message is not sent in the appropriate time, the message will not have the effect that it should have, as the intention will not be met. Likewise, the geographical distance also affects the message. Like time means, supposing tomorrow you have an exam, you have a competitive exam, and the letter of that examination that you are to appear at this center, at this time, at this place reaches you tomorrow morning or day after tomorrow, how you will reach the center. So, because of the time means the communication has not been reached in proper time. You are supposed to appear in the test tomorrow, but the letter is reaching you tomorrow itself or day after tomorrow. So, because of this time, there is an obstacle in the communication. Communication is in the written form. It is a message through which the examiner wants to inform you that tomorrow you are supposed to appear for the test. But since it has not reached, the communication has not reached to you in time, there is a obstacle in the communication. Similarly, distance also. Suppose I am here in Delhi and I want to communicate in Washington and in USA. So, because of this distance, although there are good electronic devices through which I can communicate with you, but still, if because of these distances, if there is some disturbance in this process, because of this geographical distance, because of the distance involved, the message may not be communicated to you in the right manner. So, this distance can be one of the obstacles. That is why face-to-face communication has the least physical communication barriers, and it is easier. Means when you make face-to-face communication, when you can see eye to with the people, I mean, it is the best way of communicating, and there is less physical barrier in this. So, as you are seeing, the noise is the physical barrier. Suppose you are speaking something, as you are noticing in this picture, there are a lot of people who are creating noise, and because of this noise, the communication, what I want to communicate, will not reach to you, or not reach to the receiver of the message in the right perspective. So, noise is one of the physical barrier of the communication. So, noise is the disturbance found in the environment of the communication. It interprets the communication process, and it acts as a barrier, as it makes the message less accurate, less productive and unclear. Means because of this noise, the receiver of the message will not able to understand properly. It might even prevent the message from reaching the receiver. Means because of if the noise is very loud, so the receiver will not able to receive the message itself, and they will not able to hear, because if it is a oral communication, I mean through hearing you can understand the message. So, because of the loud noise, you will not able to hear the message. So, this is one of the obstacle of this communication. And similarly, mediums and channel of communications can also be an obstacle. Mediums and channel of communication must be decided upon by the role it plays, distances that must be covered, disturbances that might arise. Means when you have communication, you must select the channel of communication, you must select the right communication channels through which you can communicate it properly. Because of the distance involved, because of the disturbances, if there is a disturbances in the channel, suppose when I am communicating and there is some disturbance in your TV set, you will not able to understand what I am saying. So, communication will be incomplete. Sometimes medium itself act as a communication barrier and disturb communication flow. As I said, means the medium between you and me is the TV set. So, if on your TV set, or if you are seeing through YouTube, on your computer if you are seeing, and there is some disturbance in your computer, the communication you will not able to understand. So, that is what the barrier is. Every kind of medium has one or the other defects, and disadvantages over the another. You may say this communication method is, this channel is good, this channel bad. Every communication channel has its own advantage and disadvantage or its own problem. Sometimes the barrier can be information overflow. Information overflow means when information becomes more than that can be received at a particular time by the receiver. Like you might have seen in a corporate world that a receptionist is at the same time is receiving 2-3 different phone calls, and if she is receiving 2 different phone calls, one on the one ear and the other on the other ear, she will not able to understand properly because she is on the phone, 2 phones, and at the same point of time she will not able to understand properly. She will understand some part of the message, but effective communication will not take place because of this information overflow. So when the information overflow takes place, then also it is an obstacle to communication. You might have observed people at the top level, means where people or different people are reporting to him. So there is always a work pressure and there is always a information overflow to that person. So when there is a too much load of information, you will not able to interpret all the information in the right manner. So this is basically the barriers to communication. So in this case, the receiver does not have the capacity to get all the information and can miss some important points or misinterpret the meaning of the whole message altogether. Like suppose if 2-3 people are simultaneously communicating with me, right, I will able to understand some part of the one's communication, some part of the other communication. So I may misinterpret the communication that is being made by these 2 different people. So because of this information overflow, there can be a barrier in the communication, there will be lack of understanding. Sometimes the workspace is designed in a manner that the communication is not effective. So workspace design can be also one of the obstacles. If the employees' workspaces are far away from the room of the employer here means the manager or the person who want to communicate, or between the 2 parties, the boss and the subordinate. So the employer, if there is a large distance between these 2 people, the design is made in a manner that the boss, who is communicating quite often, is sitting at a far off place, and the other person is sitting at far off place, and the electronic device is not effective. There will be an obstacle in the communication. They will not be able to communicate with the employees, take proper orders, make plans, and get feedbacks and suggestions of new ideas. So the workspace design can be one of the obstacles. Sitting arrangements and physical comfort also fosters or impairs the communication. Means if you are, because of the comfort involved, you are sitting in a closed door room, and so this is because of the air condition, because of the weather, because of this you are sitting in such a comfort position, so you will not able to communicate it properly. So how to deal with this physical barrier? Research shows that one of the key factors in building strong and integrated team is proximity. If the proximity between the 2 parties, that is the center of the message and the receiver of the message, is there, the communication will be more effective. Although all these barriers which we are discussing, we'll discuss later on how to overcome these barriers. So you might have seen like these days the work design, the station, workstation, the design of the workstation has changed. If you go to any corporate office in a multinational companies like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, you will find that most of the executives, most of the people who are working in the organization, they are sitting in a large hall, and there are different cabins. The cabins is not fully covered, they are half covered by the glass, and then each of them are working so that the communication remains easy. So in these companies, in large multinational companies, or for that matter I will say any of the good corporate, no longer have managers and executives sits behind closed doors or in a joint scheduled offices. They have a more of an open floor way of operating, where all the managers, employees and directors of the company operate in an open space with tables sticking side by side and people working face to face in a large as well as large room. So this is basically how they create. So apart from this physical barrier, the other important barrier is cultural barrier. So now let's discuss what we mean by cultural barrier. Culture, what is culture? Culture is a all socially transmitted behavior, arts, architectures, languages, signs, symbols, ideas, beliefs, norms, traditions, rituals, etc. All this is covered under culture. Means different people have different countries, different geographical within India. If you go to South India, people have different architects. People uses different architects. In North India, there is a different architect. The language is different. Signs are different. Symbols are different. So all these traditions are different. Rituals are different. So you will find that different geography have different rituals or different culture. So all this comes under cultures, which is learnt and shared in a particular social group of the same nationality, ethnicity or religion, etc. Means it may be based on nation, it may be based on ethnicity, it may be based on religion. Means different spaces, different people have following of different culture. Different cultures have different meaning of words, behaviors and gestures. Culture also gives rise to prejudices, ethnocentrism, manners and options. It forms the way people think and behave. When people belonging to different cultures communicate, these factors can become barrier. What it means is that if people following different cultures communicate with each other, the cultural barrier or cultural factors which I have just told you can be I am saying one of the barrier. Like for example, language. Different cultures have developed their own languages as well as part of their heritage. People are comfortable communicating in their own language, whereas they have to work hard to learn new language. Means like say people in North India, North Indians are mostly Hindi speaking people, and when they communicate in some other language, they sometime for some words they are not able to express themselves properly. So the other person who is receiving the message, if you do not have the command over the other language, you will not able to communicate it effectively. Though this can be a barrier, language can be one of the barrier. Non-verbal communication cannot be relied upon in communication between people from different cultures, as that is also different like languages. Signs, symbols and gestures value in different cultures. For example, the sign thumbs up is taken as a sign of approval and wishing good luck in most of the cultures. But if it is taken as an insult in Bangladesh. So means if you are in a different country where the thumbs up meaning differently than what you want to communicate, it will become a barrier. You want to communicate something different, but the receiver of the message will understand it in a different manner. It will act as a barrier. Stereotyping is the process of creating a picture of a whole culture, overgeneralizing all people belonging to the same culture as having similar characteristics and categorizing people accordingly. It is a belief about a certain group and is mostly negative. Stereotyping can be done on the basis of many things like nationality, gender, race, religion, ethnicity, age, etc. For example, Asian students are stereotyped to be good at maths. We at Indians, we are comparatively called, are better in maths as being Asian, which is a positive stereotype. But there is also cultural stereotype of all people following a particular belief as being violent. So in some culture, people are more of violent. Their belief is more of violent, and it's called negative stereotyping. So ethnocentrism is the process of dividing culture as us and them. Means it is us and it is them. The people of someone's own culture are categorized as the group, and the other culture is out group. Means people of your own culture is called in group, and the people of other culture is called out group. There is always greater preference to in groups. There is an illusion of out groups as evil and inferior. The people of one culture have the feeling that the people of other culture is of out group and they are inferior to them. This evolution is mostly negative. So how to overcome these cultural differences? Now that the world has openly embraced globalization, you find yourself working in a different countries. Means because of the advent of the multinational companies, people of the different cultures are working at same place with different races of people and sometimes very different cultures and moral backgrounds. So this is why companies tend to promote organizational culture, means each organization tries to create its own organizational culture. Organizational culture is a unique company environment, morals and rules that all members of the organization must follow and happily accept. Any employee who does not fit into the culture eventually is out of the company either by choice or by force. Means if you don't follow the organizational culture, you will be out of the company. So this is cultural barrier. Apart from this physical barrier and the cultural barrier, the other barrier can be semantic barrier. When I'm saying these, when we are discussing these barriers, it doesn't mean that in all communication these barriers will arise. But these can be the reasons, these can be the factors because of which there will be a lack of understanding between the two parties, and that is what barrier means. Semantic barriers. Now let's discuss what semantic barriers means. Semantic is the study of meaning, signs and symbols used for communication. The word is derived from sema, a Greek word meaning signs. Semantic barriers to communication are the symbolic obstacles that distorts the sent message in some other way than intended. Means whatever the way I am intending it, the other party is not able to understand it the way I want to send it, what I want to communicate. So making the message difficult to understand. So because of this, semantic barriers. The meaning of the word, signs and symbols might be different from one person to another, and in the same word might have hundreds of meanings. Means the same words may be having different meanings. It is similar to and related to language barriers in a communication. For example, the meaning braces. We in India and in American English, the braces which is used as a defined metallic structure to adjust teeth in American English, whereas it means the part of the clothing in the British language. So the same word braces in the English itself, in the British English, they have a different meaning, and in the American English, it has a different meaning. So if the American is using the word braces, then the person in the United States, in England will understand it differently, because he will take it as a part of clothing. So the word astonish can be used to describe surprise as well as startle. Startle means shock. So this word astonish, when you're using this word astonish, this can be used as a surprise as well as startle. The words when used in someone can have any of the meaning. Means you can take either as a startle or as a surprise. The context in which it is used will only let the receiver know what the sender mean. Another example is the word God, which is used differently by people following different religion. So these are the examples of semantic barriers. Similarly, you can give another example like say bird, B-U-Y, by, B-Y, by and B-Y-E, by. All these are being pronounced in the same manner, but all these three words have different meaning. This is nothing but semantic barriers. So this is about semantic barriers. Now let's discuss the psychological barriers. The psychological barrier of communication is the influence of psychological state of the communicators. Communicators are the two parties, the sender and the receiver, which creates an obstacle for effective communication. Means what is your psychological frame of mind in which you are sitting, or in which you are receiving the message and in which the sender is sending the message. This psychological barrier can be, this psychological reason, psychological factor can be one of the factor. I am using the word can be one of the factor. Communication is highly influenced by the mental condition that the communicators are in and is disturbed by mental disturbances. If suppose for example, I am sitting in a very disturbed frame of mind, and you come to me and you said very jocularly that you are looking smart. And that time, since I'm sitting, I'm having a different frame of mind, I'll take you are just joking on me. So this is because of the psychological barrier. Every person's mind is unique, and communication does not work like that in machines or in numbers. Means it doesn't work like a computer. The people who are involved in communication matters as much as the message. Means the people with whom you are communicating, this is as important as the message itself is. So this is about, friends, about the different barriers. We'll continue with this psychological barrier after a short break, And so far we have discussed the 4 different type of barrier: the physical barrier, the cultural barrier, the semantic barriers, and we will continue this psychological barrier after a brief break.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving us detailed information about the various types of barriers. And dear friends, we would be continuing further from the point where we left. That is, we are going to discuss from the psychological barriers in our next session, which will be after a short break. So you are requested to be with us. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome back to this session. Friends, as you know that today we are talking on barriers to communication. In the previous session we discussed some of the barriers, and we have started with the psychological barrier in the previous session. So we are going to continue further from psychological barrier, and we would be discussing more on barriers to communication in this session. Friends, for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Vipin Kumar Agrawal. Dr. Vipin Kumar Agrawal is Principal in Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. Friends, we would like to tell you all that you have a privilege to be part of this session. You can ask questions through our toll-free number. Our number is 1800110430. I repeat, our number is 1800110430. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Vipin Kumar Agrawal, once again. Hello, sir. Welcome to the session.
So, friends, we'll continue with these barriers, and we were discussing before the break the psychological barriers. There are various reasons, there are various factors because of which the psychological barriers arises. These reasons can be lack of attention, selective retentions, distrust, perception, attitudes and opinions are some of the causes of psychological barrier. For example, if your boss does not trust you, he or she will only send selective information, which makes the communication ineffective. lack of attention. When a person's mind is distracted or preoccupied with other things, I mean, you are listening to my lecture, you are viewing my lecture, but if your mind is somewhere else, you are not able to understand what I am communicating. This is basically psychological barrier. So, when a person's mind is distracted or preoccupied with other things, the person is not able to form proper message, listen to what others tell him or her, interpret the message as required and give proper feedback. Means if you are not attentive, the communication, both the parties, whether the sender or the receiver, if they are not attentive, they will not able to communicate properly, because neither they will able to interpret properly, not able to send the message, not able to receive the message properly, and nor able to give the feedback properly. Another reason of the psychological barrier can be poor retention. Retention of information is the capacity of the memory of the brain to store information, and the way brain stores information is memory. Brain does not store all the information it come across, but only the ones it deems useful for future. So, half the information is lost in the retention process. You are not able to retain everything that is being communicated. So, if you are able to retain 40% of it, 60% of it, the communication will not be complete. Distrust and defensiveness can be other reason of the psychological barrier. Communication is successful when the communicators trust each other. Lack of trust makes them derive negative meaning of the message and they ignore the message. Means you don't have a trust. The person who is communicating with you, the sender of the message, if you don't trust him or her, you will not able to retain the message properly and you will interpret in your own manner. So that will, you may have a negative meaning out of it. So the communication will not be complete or it will not be effective. Closed minds and filtering. Man is selfish by nature and put his own needs and problems above all else. This sometimes leads people to filter information that someone is trying to convey to them. This might be due to the mistrust, competition, jealousy, or the view that message is insignificant. So, if you are not sitting with open mind, if you are filtering the information, you will not able to communicate it properly. Organizational. So, apart from this psychological barriers, there can be other barrier which is called organizational barriers. It may be because of organizational structure, because it may be a status. We will discuss all these things. So, let us discuss what this organizational barriers means. Since now we have studied generic barriers to communication. Now, when we talk in the context of an organization, then there can be barriers to communication inherent in various elements of organization. Basically, organizational structure greatly affects the capabilities of the employees as far as the communication is concerned. Some major organizational hindrances in the way of communications are now we will discuss all these hindrances. Like organizational policies can be one of the hindrances. Organization policies determine the relationship among all the persons working in the enterprise. For example, it can be the policy of the organization that communication will be in written form only. In such a situation, anything that could be conveyed in a few words shall have to be communicated in the written forms. Consequently, work gets delayed. So, this is obstacle. Rules and regulations can be the obstacle. Organizational rules becomes barriers in communication by determining the subject matter, medium, etc. of communication. Troubled by the defined rules, the sender do not send some of the messages. Organizational hierarchy. Under organizations, all the employees are divided into many categories on the basis of their levels, means top level, medium level, broadly if you define lower level. This formal division acts as a barrier in communication, especially when the communication moves from bottom to the top. For example, when a lower level employee has to send the message to a superior at the top level, there is a fear in his or her mind that the communication may be faulty, and because of this fear, the communicator cannot convey herself or himself clearly and in time. Means he keeps on thinking whether I should say this thing or I should not say things, whether I should write this thing or I should not write. So, because of this status barrier, so because of these levels involved, so it delays the decision making. complexity in the organization can be another reason of the of communication barrier. The greater the number of managerial levels in an organization makes it more complex. It results in delay in communication, and information gets changed before it reaches the receiver. In other words, negative things or criticism are concealed. Thus, the more the number of managerial levels in the organization, more ineffective the communication becomes. So, more is the level, the more is the complications in the communication, and it will become less effective. Organizational facilities. Sometimes these organizational facilities can be the obstacle, can be the barrier. Organizational facilities mean making available sufficient stationery, telephone, translator, or other electronic devices. When these facilities are insufficient in an organization, the communication will be not timely. Means if these are sufficient, the communication will be timely, clear, and in accordance with the necessity. So, means if these organization facilities are sufficient, then the communication will be timely and effective. If these communication facilities are not sufficient, suppose your internet is not working and you want to mail to in America, or you want to mail to a person who is sitting in Bombay and you are sitting in Delhi, how will you communicate if your mail is not working? If mail is the only method through which you make the written communication. So, if these facilities are not there, the internet facility is not properly provided to you, you are not able to communicate properly. So, these facilities are important for communication, and if these facilities are insufficient, your communication will be meaningless. So, apart from these organizational barriers, there can be personal barriers. There are some barriers which are directly connected with the sender and the receiver. They are called personal barriers. From the point of view of the convenience, they have been divided into two parts. Means on the part of the superior as well as on the part of the subordinates. Barriers related to superiors: fear of challenge of authority. Means the superiors have the feeling of that their authority might be challenged. Everybody desires to occupy a high office in the organization. In this hope, the officer tried to conceal their weakness by not communicating their ideas. Lack of confidence in the subordinates. Means the superior doesn't have confidence in the subordinates. So, top level superiors think that the lower level employees are less capable, and therefore they ignore the information or suggestion sent to them. This is the communication barrier on the part of the superior. Barriers related to the subordinate. Unwillingness to communicate. Means the subordinates are not willing to communicate. Sometimes the subordinates do not want to send any information to their superiors. When the subordinates feel that the information is of negative nature and will adversely affect them, an effort is made to conceal that information. Means if your productivity is coming down, the people at the middle level don't want to communicate to the people at the higher level, because it will have a negative impact on their functioning. So they would like to conceal it, or they prefer to conceal it. So there will be communication barrier. The top level people will not able to know what the real situation in the organization is. So this is barrier. Similarly, the lack of proper incentives. The lack of incentives to the subordinate is because of the fact that their suggestions or ideas are not given any importance. Means if they have the feeling that whatever we communicate, whatever the suggestions we give, the people at the higher level do not give proper importance to it. In this situation, if they have this feeling, they will not communicate, they will not give their ideas, they will not communicate. If the superiors ignore the subordinates, they become indifferent towards any exchange of ideas in future. So this is about obstacles of communication. We have talked about various types of obstacles, various types of barriers that comes in the way of communication. But how to overcome it? How to make communication effective? In any organization, this is a challenge, because basically I said earlier in the beginning of my lecture that in any human relation, the good communication, effective communication is important. So in the organization, while you are communicating, we must take into account these factors, because and if we follow these factors, we will able to communicate more effectively. So the point is how we can improve communication. Firstly I can say clarity of the ideas before communication. Whatever you want to speak, whatever you want to write, the sender of the message must have a clear understanding, clear thought process that what he or she wants to communicate. The message can be conveyed properly only if it is clearly formulated in the mind of the communicator. The message should be encoded in direct and simple language so that the receiver is able to understand it without much difficulty. Means you must communicate in a manner so that the receiver of the message must understand it in the language which he or she understands, in the same words which he or she understands. Communication according to the need of the receiver. Whenever we communicate, we must keep in mind the needs of the receiver of the message, or it should be our effort to see that whenever message or information we send across must be of the value to the receiver. Sender must select the words according to the education level of the receiver. Means who is your receiver? The communicator must keep in mind, the sender of the message must keep in mind to whom he is communicating. According to the him or her, this sender of the message should communicate. Proper feedback. Feedback is also an important element in the communication process. The sender of the message has sent it through message and encoded the message. The receiver of the message decoded and understand it. Whether the receiver of the message has understand it or not, this the communicator, that is the sender of the message, will know only through proper feedback. So there must be a proper feedback mechanism in the organization so that the communication becomes effective. Feedback helps to know the effect of or success of communication given by the sender. Communication is complete only when the message is understood by the receiver. Means communication is creating an understanding. When you understand, the receiver understand, then the communication is complete. So we can never know whether the receiver has understood the message or not. Not only understood the message, understand the message in the right perspective is also important. So it is important that the feedback should be, we should receive the feedback, understand the message or not, unless we get the feedback. Feedback also provide opportunity for suggestions and criticism. Means when you get the sender of the message will get the feedback, then the suggestions and the criticism will arise. Through the suggestions or the criticism, the sender will understand it. And the follow-up communication, follow-up of the communication. There should be a proper follow-up of the information given by the managers to the subordinates. It is both way, means by the subordinates to the managers and the managers to the subordinates. This follow-up helps to remove hurdles, misunderstanding of instructions given to the managers to the subordinates or the suggestions given by the subordinates to the managers. If suppose subordinates suggest you something, give some information, suggest you something to the manager, and manager doesn't implement it but explains to the subordinate what are the problems because of this in the implementation of this idea, then the subordinate would understand that this is the problem in implementing this suggestion. Next time he will take another initiative to give better suggestions for improving the productivity, for improving the organization. But if you don't communicate, if the manager doesn't give feedback to the subordinate that the suggestion which the subordinate has given, what has been done, what is the result of that suggestion, so the subordinate will not give this suggestion next time. So if he gets the feedback that what is the problem, he will come out with a better ideas. So this follow-up communication is important in any of the communication. Open mind. Another method is open mind. Means both the parties must have open mind while communicating. The parties to communication must have open mind. They should not try to withhold information for their personal interest. They should not react before receiving and listening the full message. But an important factor in the communication is you must be a good listener and you must be a good sender. Means sometimes people react before listening properly, before getting the complete message. So you should be a good listener and good receiver of the full message, then only you will have, means when you will able to do it when you sit with a open mind. So the open mindedness is important in any communication. Completeness of the message. Another method of effective communication is that message must be complete. A message is effective only when it is given completely. The receiver should not be left guessing. Means you are communicating something but the other parties keep guessing what does it means. It may lead to misunderstanding. A complete message carries all necessary facts and figures. Brevity of communication. In communication, the message should be as brief as possible. Meaningless words and information overload should be avoided. Unnecessary repetition and over elaboration spoil the message. The message should be concise and concrete. Whenever you are communicating, whether oral or written, through gesture, whatever the means of communication may be, it should be brief and it should be properly designed. So this is very important while communicating. Timeliness of the message. Whenever you are communicating, it must be at the right time. The message should reach the receiver at the right time. To ensure timeliness of the message, proper media should be used. If you want to communicate to the other party immediately, either through telephone or through emails, if you want to write in the message, whatever the medium you select, but it should be according to the time. Supposing I want some information to be reached to America tomorrow itself or today itself or right at the within minutes. If I send a letter, the letter will reach after 3-4 days. So it will not be, timeliness will not be followed. I write a simple mail and the person will receive it immediately, so the timeline will be followed. So timeliness of the message is important in communication. Compassion. For effective communication, the communicator must understand the intelligence level and the background of the receiver. He must know what information the receiver exactly needs and in what form, because otherwise it will be a barrier. So if you want to overcome this barrier, you must understand what the receiver level of the understanding is and you should communicate accordingly. There should be consistency in communication. The words which you choose, the expression which you choose, there should be consistency in that, so that the word is being interpreted in the same manner at different point of time. The message sent must be consistent with the objectives, policies and programs of the organization. The actions and behavior of the sender must also support his or her communication. So there should be consistency. Attention. Careful listening is essential for effective communication. The message should be conveyed in such a way that the emotions and sentiments of the receivers are not being hurt. Strategic use of grapevine means another method of effective communication is you must use the grapevine effectively. What does a grapevine means? Grapevine means informal communication. Apart from the formal communication, as we discussed last time, that in any organization there is a formal communication and there is a informal communication. Informal communication is also known as the grapevine. So every manager or the organization must use this informal communication effectively. A manager should make use of this grapevine to supplement the formal channels of communication. Means apart from this formal communication, you use this informal communication methods. For this purpose, he must understand the informal communication networks and should make their intelligent use to fill the gaps in formal communication. Means suppose in an organization, you want to communicate something, you want to make some rules and rules for the organization, you just call the union leaders and tell them the organization want to create these new rules and make them understand. Through informal discussion with their colleagues, they will make the colleagues understand that this is the communication, this the organization want, and it will be easy for the formal managers to get these rules implemented in the organization. So every organization must use this informal communication effectively. So apart from these factors which you can keep in mind while communicating, there are other additional aids for promoting free and frank communication, like informal aids. Open door policy. Open door policy means in an organization you create an environment where the subordinates are also able to communicate properly to the superiors. That is what we call it two-way communication, or not only the communication should flow from top to the bottom, but it should also flow from bottom to the top. There should be horizontal communication, there will be circular communication, right? So all types of communication should flow. We call it open door policy, means there should be open culture in the organization where people can communicate with each other easily. Participation in social functions. Many times we say, like when you attend a seminar, when you attend a conclave, and after the conclave, over a cup of tea, many people communicate with each other. So this is occasion, on the T itself, you are able to communicate various policies of the organization with the people whom to you want to communicate. So this is basically on various festivals, on national festivals and other festivals, you organize social function, and these social functions you communicate with the people. So formal aid, suggestion schemes, personal counseling. So these are the various methods through which you can make communication effectively. But let me tell you at this point of view, communication is not a substitute for good management, but good management is required to operate the communication system effectively and efficiently. So on the base of this, like we have discussed what are the barriers of communication and what are the methods of overcoming these barriers or these. Now let's discuss, I will not say, I will just name them, that these are the 10 commandments of good communication. Number 1, listen carefully, find areas of common interest and listen for main ideas. Number 2, plan ahead, be prepared and keep the message brief. Number 3, avoid stereotyping and assign ideas to right categories. I mean, these are the commandments. If you follow these commandments, the communication will be more effective. Number 4, distinguish between the desire to know and need to know. You have to distinguish this. 5, distinguish among facts, references and conclusions. 6, avoid attributing motives to other. 7, attend to behavioral ones as well as language of directions. We have discussed these while talking of the barriers and how to overcome these barriers, but let's discuss this in form of commandments. We are discussing it in form of commandments. Number 8, say enough but leave some things unsaid. 9, do not shun all conflicts but avoid unnecessary conflicts. 10, withhold value judgment about context of delivery until strategically appropriate. So these are very famous 10 commandments for good communication. Now we have discussed barriers and actions required. Now put them in same pace, that what is a barrier and how to overcome this. Like suppose we discussed while talking of the barriers of communication, organization structure. That if the organizational structure, we talked about that many times there are too many layers in the organization, too many hierarchies in the organization. There is a status barrier. Organization is such that there is a one-way communication is being promoted. Communication. So these are the structural barriers that comes in the organization that normally you find in the organization. So how to overcome this barrier? In order to overcome this barrier, you encourage upward and eternal communication. As I just said, if you want to create an effective communication, encourage open-end culture. Means open culture in the organization where two-way communication, the lateral communication, the horizontal communication, the two-way communication is being provided. So there should not be one-way communication, there should be communication at all levels. Make the organization decentralized. If you give more and more power to people at the lower level, these organizational structure barriers will be overcome. And sometime you make a very vertical hierarchy. And if there are too many levels, at each level the communication will filter. So when the person at the top level communicates something to the people at the lowest level, at every level there will be some filtering of information. So in order to overcome this, we should have a minimum hierarchical levels in the organization. So if we follow this, we can overcome these structural barriers. Similarly, there can be status barriers. For this, you can create climate of trust, open and honest communication at all times, which I just referred. Language barriers, problem of sentiments, faulty expression, inadequate vocabulary, differences in perception. These are all language barriers. How to overcome this? Speak the language of the recipient. Be a good observer and listener. So if these are the barriers, you can overcome this barrier in this manner in the organization. Resistance to change. Quite often you find that people at the lower level always resist change. So through effective communication, how you can overcome this resistance? You can disclose all facts associated with change. Explain reason for and expected result from the change. Allow time for preparations and adjustment. So the barrier in the communication is people resisting change. How do you overcome this? Through these methods. You explain them the reason of implementing the change, allow them to speak on this method, train them, so you can overcome this barrier. So this is way, friends, you can overcome the different barriers which we normally find in any of the organization. And as I said in the beginning, that organization, the communication is important, but it is not supplement of effective management, but effective management can be made by effective communication. So this is about how you can improve your organization by improving communication.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving us this productive session on barriers to communication. We believe that your communication to be easy and it keeps on flowing so that your relations become intact. Friends, we are taking your leave with the promise that we are going to meet again soon and would be discussing more in our series on principles of management. So far this lecture is concerned. If you have any question or if you have any feedback for this lecture, you can contact us through our email ID, that is info.cec@nic.in. Definitely you can post your questions pertaining to today's lecture as well as all the lectures which were conducted in the past, as those lectures are there for you on YouTube. So keep watching those lectures and keep writing us. Today we are taking your leave, and yes, of course, we are going to meet again soon. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.